We always hear about these new medical breakthroughs, right?
Yeah.
And it's so exciting to think about new treatments,
Right.
reaching people who need them, as quickly as possible.
Yeah.
But the thing is, and you probably know this from the stuff we've been looking at, that the standard path for drug development, it's like an ultramarathon.
That's a good way to put it.
It's this really long process. Sometimes it can take over a decade.
It can.
And cost just billions and billions of dollars.
It really can. And just to kind of give everyone a picture of what that looks like, you basically have several key stages.
Yep.
You start with scientists, discovering potential drug candidates,
Right.
trying to understand, how they might work. Then there's a ton of testing, first in the lab,
Right.
and then on animals to see, how safe is this?
Yeah.
And if that all looks good, then it moves on to the clinical trials in humans.
Oh, right. Yeah. So many phases.
Multiple phases, exactly.
Yeah.
And it's all to evaluate, is it safe and is it effective? And then finally you have the regulatory bodies like the FDA.
Right.
Looking at all of that data and deciding if it's good enough to approve.
Wow. So much work.
And even after approval, there's still monitoring going on. You're never really done.
Makes sense. So you shared some articles highlighting how urgent it is for patients, facing these serious life-threatening or really debilitating conditions.
Yeah.
And it makes you think, right? Is there a way to speed this whole thing up?
Right.
But without compromising safety and effectiveness?
Right.
Like, are there faster routes than this whole drug development marathon when time is just so critical?
That's exactly what we're diving into today.
Okay, love it.
Our mission is to understand those alternative pathways,
Okay.
the accelerated ones that are designed to, get promising treatments to patients faster.
I like it.
So we'll be focusing on two main mechanisms: accelerated approval
Okay.
and breakthrough therapy designation.
Got it.
We'll also touch a bit on orphan drug designation as another way to address, those really urgent medical needs.
Okay, so let's dive into this need for speed thing.
Yeah.
It might seem obvious, but I think it's good to really underscore the human element here.
Oh, absolutely.
It's especially for the individuals and families you mentioned in those articles.
Right, yeah. Because for someone who just got diagnosed, with an aggressive cancer or some kind of rapidly progressing neurological disorder,
Right.
waiting 10 to 15 years for a new therapy,
Yeah.
that's just not an option.
Yeah, that's not feasible.
Yeah. And every month, every week, even every day can be so critical.
Right.
When you're dealing with something that's life-threatening, that standard timeline just feels like forever.
It really is a stark reality.
It is.
And there's also that ethical consideration, like you pointed out in one of the articles. When a treatment shows promise early on for a condition
Yeah.
that has very limited options.
Right.
You could even say no options.
Right.
There's a strong argument to try to make it available to the people who desperately need it
Yeah.
as quickly as possible, but of course responsibly.
Responsibly, yes. It's all about balancing the desire to get these potentially life-saving treatments out there faster
Right.
with the need to make absolutely sure they are safe and they are effective.
Yeah. We can't compromise patient well-being for speed.
Exactly.
Okay, so this brings us to that first expedited pathway. Accelerated approval.
Yes.
What exactly is this, and how does it actually shorten that really long timeline we talked about?
So accelerated approval is an FDA pathway
Okay.
that's specifically designed to speed up the availability of drugs for serious conditions
Okay.
and that fill an unmet medical need.
Okay.
Think of it like a conditional approval that happens sooner than usual.
Okay, conditional.
Yeah.
So what are the conditions?
Right. So the main condition is that this approval is based on a surrogate endpoint.
The surrogate endpoint.
Yeah. And this is a really important concept to understand.
Okay.
A surrogate endpoint is a marker. It could be a lab measurement, something from a scan, or even a physical sign that doctors can see.
Okay.
And it's something that we think is reasonably likely to predict a real benefit for the patient.
So it's not directly measuring how the patient feels or how well they're functioning,
Right.
or even if they're surviving.
Exactly.
It's like something that suggests those benefits are coming.
Exactly.
Can you maybe give an example?
Sure. Let's say there's a new drug for a really rare and very aggressive type of childhood leukemia.
Okay.
And early studies show that this drug really lowers the level of cancer cells in the bone marrow.
Okay.
So that reduction in the cancer cell count,
Yeah.
that could be considered a surrogate endpoint.
Okay.
It's reasonably likely that lowering the number of cancer cells is going to lead to some clinical benefit, like a child living longer or having a better quality of life.
Makes sense.
But it doesn't prove those things right away.
Got it.
Yeah.
So the FDA might grant accelerated approval
Right.
based on this promising surrogate endpoint.
Yeah. It's exactly.
And then doctors can prescribe the drug to patients earlier
Right.
than if they had to wait for that definitive proof of survival.
Exactly.
But it is conditional, right?
It is, very much so.
What are the drug company's obligations here?
So because that initial approval hinges on this indirect marker,
Yeah.
the company has to conduct more studies.
Okay.
These are often called post-marketing studies or phase 4 studies. Right. And the goal is to confirm that clinical benefit.
So it's like, okay, we see the potential here. We want to get this to patients who need it now.
Yeah.
But you absolutely have to prove it works later.
Exactly. And these aren't just suggestions.
Right.
If these follow-up studies don't show that the drug actually provides that clinical benefit, the FDA can withdraw the accelerated approval.
Wow.
Meaning the drug could be taken off the market.
So it's like a safety mechanism.
It is, absolutely.
Okay, so accelerated approval prioritizes getting the drug to people quickly based on an early indicator.
Right.
With the requirement to confirm everything later on.
Exactly.
Okay, let's move on to the other pathway you mentioned. Breakthrough therapy designation.
Okay.
How is this different from accelerated approval?
So breakthrough therapy designation is another tool.
Okay.
It's designed to speed up drug development and review for serious or life-threatening conditions.
Okay.
But it's different from accelerated approval in when it's granted and what evidence it's based on.
Okay.
So with accelerated approval, it's all about the evidence at the time of potential approval.
Right.
Breakthrough therapy designation, a drug can get this much earlier in development.
Okay, how much earlier?
It can be granted as early as phase 1 or 2 trials.
Wow.
Yeah, so, phase 1, that's usually focused on safety in a small group of people.
Right.
Phase 2 starts looking at effectiveness and side effects in a bigger group.
Okay.
And there are 2 main criteria for breakthrough therapy designation.
Okay.
First, the drug has to be for a serious or life-threatening condition.
Okay.
This is similar to accelerated approval.
Right. But the second thing is that there has to be preliminary clinical evidence.
Okay.
Showing that the drug might be a lot better than anything we have now.
Okay, so not just a marker that might predict a benefit.
Right.
It's like you're seeing early signs of the actual benefit.
Exactly.
What counts as a clinically significant endpoint then?
That depends on the specific disease, really.
Okay.
So for cancer, it could be a statistically significant increase in how long people survive.
Okay.
Or a big reduction in the risk of the cancer coming back or getting worse.
Okay.
For a chronic illness, it might be a really noticeable improvement in how people can function every day.
Yeah.
Or a big drop in how often they have really bad symptoms. And it's important that this improvement is a lot better than what existing treatments can do.
Okay, so what happens when a drug gets this designation? What are the advantages?
Well, it gets a bunch of benefits,
Okay.
all aimed at speeding up the journey to patients.
Yep.
The company gets more guidance from the FDA.
On how to design the rest of the development program.
Yep.
So that means more meetings with the FDA, direct advice,
Oh, wow.
and these drugs are eligible for priority review,
Okay.
which means the FDA tries to review their application much faster.
Right.
And they might also be eligible for fast-track designation,
Got it.
which can speed up both the development and review.
So it's like the FDA saying, hey, this looks really promising. We want to help you get this to people quickly and safely.
Exactly.
You mentioned orphan drug designation earlier.
Right.
Can you quickly explain how that fits in?
Sure. So orphan drug designation, it's meant to encourage the development of drugs for rare diseases,
Right.
usually affecting fewer than 200,000 people in the U.S.,
Okay.
or in cases where the sales of the drug probably won't even cover the costs of developing it.
Oh, wow.
So it's about addressing those unmet needs, but it does it through incentives.
Okay.
Things like tax credits, waiving some FDA fees, and even market exclusivity if the drug gets approved. It's different from accelerated approval.
Yeah.
Because it's not about relying on surrogate endpoints
Got it.
or showing early evidence of improvement like breakthrough therapy.
So it's a separate thing, but it has the same goal of getting treatments to people who need them.
Exactly.
Okay, so can we go through a couple of hypothetical scenarios
Yeah, definitely.
just to show how these pathways might work in the real world?
Let's go back to that childhood leukemia drug.
Okay.
Imagine that in those early trials, not only does it lower the cancer cell count,
Okay.
but the kids taking the drug are actually living longer
Wow, that's amazing.
than the kids getting the standard treatment.
Yeah.
So that's a clinically significant endpoint right there, survival.
Right.
And that, along with the surrogate endpoint data,
Yeah.
might make the drug a candidate for both breakthrough therapy designation and later on accelerated approval.
Wow.
Based on that surrogate endpoint, but they'd still need to confirm the survival benefit in more studies.
Okay, that's a great example. What about an example for breakthrough therapy?
So let's say there's a new drug for a really tough chronic autoimmune disease.
Okay.
And in phase 2 trials, this drug shows much better outcomes than the current treatments.
Okay.
So maybe patients are having way less pain. They can do more things every day.
Right.
And they have fewer flare-ups.
That's huge.
Yeah, so these are all clinical endpoints because they directly reflect how patients are feeling and functioning.
Right.
And because this is suggesting a big improvement over what's already available, this drug could get that breakthrough therapy designation.
Makes sense.
And that would mean more guidance from the FDA and probably a faster review.
Awesome.
Once they have all the data from the phase 3 trial.
Okay, those examples were really helpful.
Good.
But we did talk about how these accelerated processes can't be completely free of drawbacks.
Right.
What are some of the risks or limitations?
So with accelerated approval, the big question is whether the surrogate endpoint actually predicts a meaningful clinical benefit over time.
Right.
It has to be reasonably likely.
Right.
But it's not a guarantee.
Yeah.
Those post-marketing studies are so important to really validate the initial promise.
Yeah.
And sometimes they don't confirm the anticipated benefit.
Right.
And in those cases, the drug can be pulled from the market.
And with breakthrough therapy designation,
Yeah.
even though it's based on promising early data, that's still just a small group of patients.
It is. And the drug still has to go through those rigorous phase 3 trials in a much bigger group of patients to really establish safety and effectiveness.
Right.
There's no guarantee that the good results from earlier trials will hold up in those later studies.
So these expedited pathways are about balancing the need to provide treatments quickly with the need for strong evidence.
Exactly. It's about getting promising therapies to patients faster while still sticking to good science and putting patient safety first.
Why is all of this important for our listeners?
Well, if you or someone you care about is dealing with a serious illness, understanding these pathways can help you understand how new treatment options might become available.
Right.
And if you work in healthcare or the pharmaceutical industry, it's important to understand how these things work.
Yeah.
And for anyone who's interested in medical progress,
Right.
it shows how this whole system of approving new medicines is always evolving.
It really highlights that it's not a fixed system.
It isn't.
It's always adapting.
And regulatory agencies like the FDA, they're always evaluating and refining these pathways based on what they learn and new scientific discovery.
Okay, so before we wrap up,
Yeah.
could we just go over the key differences between accelerated approval and breakthrough therapy designation one last time?
Of course. So accelerated approval, that's about speeding up access to drugs for serious conditions where there's a big need.
Okay.
And it's based on those surrogate endpoints that we think predict clinical benefit. But it requires those post-marketing studies to really confirm the benefit.
Right.
And the approval can be taken away if those studies don't work out.
Okay.
Breakthrough therapy designation, that's given much earlier in the process.
Right.
And it's based on early evidence suggesting a substantial improvement over what we already have.
Okay.
So its goal is to speed up the whole timeline of development and review.
Okay, so both are meant to get promising treatments to patients sooner. But they work at different stages.
They do?
Use different types of evidence.
Right.
And have different requirements.
Exactly.
It's all about finding that balance.
It is.
Between treating diseases urgently and making sure that the new therapies are safe and effective.
Exactly.
This has been a really fascinating look at this whole world of medical innovation.
Yeah.
And it leaves me with a final thought for you all.
Okay.
As we get better at identifying those early signs of disease and treatment response, how will our use of surrogate endpoints in accelerated approval change?
That's a good question.
And as we learn more about different diseases, what does substantial improvement really mean?
Right.
How should we be measuring and evaluating that across so many different conditions?
That's a really important question.
It's complex and always changing.
It is.
And that's what makes it so interesting.
It does.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive.
Thanks for having me.
It's great having you.
Appreciate it.